Welcome to Perspective Week 1. We're going to do 2 weeks of perspective so we can really dive into it. And I know drawing things in perspective can be somewhat intimidating or seem really difficult, but we're going to break it down into its simplest foundational skills. And I think perspective can actually be really, really fun if you simplify it and don't make it too complicated. When I was doing my graduate studies for my fine arts in painting and drawing, I had to do a whole semester of just perspective, where our final project was doing a spiral staircase in perspective. It was difficult, but was so satisfying, and it helped me to draw things from my imagination more. It helped me to be really a lot more confident in drawing different objects. And, perspective is how we make objects look three-dimensional on the two-dimensional surface. So it gives us that illusion of 3 dimensions. So we're going to practice some perspective for the sketch, and then we will also do composition thumbnails of a perspective composition that you will then choose one of to do your final drawing for next week in pen. Okay, so the types of perspective in art that we're going to talk about are linear and atmospheric, or aerial. It's sometimes called aerial perspective. I usually call it atmospheric, but those terms are interchangeable. So linear is just lines, right? You see it used mostly in like a cityscape or in architectural interiors. If you've seen like architect drawings or images of interior rooms, drawings of inside of a room, that's all linear perspective. Using lines, that's how you remember it. And this really, like I was just saying, helps create that illusion of 3D images, 3D objects on a 2D surface. Think of windows, think of furniture, all in 3 dimensions. And then atmospheric perspective is usually used in landscapes. It's using shading or color or both, or really anything else you can think of, and to create the sense that something is further away from us in space. So the color is usually blue, and things get more blue as they get further away. Think about if you're looking at a landscape far away, if it's mountains and trees, they're going to be smaller, of course, but they're also going to be less detailed. And then there's lots of layers of atmosphere, right? There's all this space between you and the thing that's far away. So that's why we call it atmospheric perspective, because it's taking into account this distance and this atmosphere, the space between the viewer and the faraway object. So it's really cool, and it seems maybe more complicated than it is. It's just things getting lighter, less detailed, and less saturated, so they have less vivid color as they get further away. And you can exaggerate it more than what you would see in real life to give it, make things look even further away. Linear and atmospheric perspective are often used together, so that's a really good combination. So here's an example from Sarah Glidden. She identifies as a Jewish American comic artist. She's still alive, and this is from her graphic novel called How to Understand Israel in 60 Days or Less. It was published in 2016. So obviously this is color, and we're not going to be using color, but it's, you can see the pen lines, which we will be using pen, and you can use ink if you want, but you don't have to. That's not required. But the reason I'm showing you this is because we can see both atmospheric and linear perspective at work in the top drawing, and then in the bottom drawing has very strong linear perspective in those buildings. So the top drawing, we can see the mountains and the body of water in the distance are very lightly drawn, not detailed. We don't have the pen outlines, the black outlines like we have in the houses in the foreground. So the houses in the foreground are more detailed. We're seeing windows, we're seeing trees, we're also seeing lines going back into perspective. So there's a little bit of linear perspective in there too. This is a great, if you like graphic novels and comics, she does really interesting stuff. Okay, here's another example of a landscape that has both atmospheric and linear perspective. The linear perspective is in the roofs, the different shapes of the roof, and the atmospheric perspective is things getting less detailed and lighter as they move further away. So, for example, the trees in the top left of the composition don't have all that ink detail in them, and same that we can see some disappearing mountains in the back that aren't as detailed as the mountains in the foreground. So this is a Chinese artist, Gong Xian. I'm so sorry. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's called Landscapes with Poems. It's from 1688. It's ink on paper. I have some links to more about these paintings. So Chinese artists are really well known, have this long, incredible history, centuries long history of working with ink and landscape paintings. If you're interested in ink or landscape, I really encourage you to look more into Chinese ink paintings. They're just beautiful. The Japanese culture has another really strong culture of these ink paintings. So really impressive stuff. And if you want to continue your studies, this would be a place to get some great inspiration and just, learn from the best. Okay, so linear perspective is what we're going to be practicing in the sketch this week, and it's using vanishing points. It could be 1 point or multiple points. So you're basically creating guidelines to help you get the perspective objects like rendered correctly. By rendered, I just mean drawn correctly. So the lines will all meet at a vanishing point, and these are those guidelines that are going to help you create stuff in perspective. So drawings can have more than one vanishing point. We call something with one vanishing point 1 point perspective. A drawing with two, or painting, this can apply to paintings or anything. A drawing with two vanishing points is called 2 point perspective. There's also 3 point perspective, and it's crazy and awesome, but I'm not expecting you to do that. We're really going to focus on the 1 point perspective. So I'm going to demonstrate that to you at the end of this, and you're going to practice it this week. So we cannot talk about linear 1 point perspective without looking at this very, very famous painting by Raphael, another one of the Ninja Turtles. His real name is Raffaello Sanzio. He was Italian and died in 1520. This is called the School of Athens. It was painted from 1509 to 1511. It's part of the Vatican in Rome, Italy. So there's links there. This is a fresco, which if you study art history, you'll learn a lot about. It's basically plaster on a wall with pigment mixed in. It's one of the most difficult mediums to work with. It's what Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel with while he was laying on his back on scaffolding. And the fresco, which is wet plaster with pigment, like powdered pigment mixed in, it is a different color when it's wet and when it dries. So the artist has to know exactly how to match up each section because they do a little bit each day. It's really one of the most difficult things. And so not only is Raphael using this incredibly difficult medium, he is also doing this 1 point perspective. We can see, if you look at the two figures in the center, right in the middle there is where the vanishing point is at sort of a horizon line. And these arched hallways are all going back to 1 point. You can even see, this is such a good example because even the floor, there's tiles or marble or whatever it is on the floor, these squares right in the foreground, those are also going into back into perspective, and the decorations on the archway in the foreground. So much perspective in here, and then obviously all the figures are in perspective. What this is a painting of The School of Athens is all the greatest mathematicians, philosophers, and scientists from classical antiquity gathered together, and they're all shown sharing ideas and learning for each other. And these are all, people that lived at different times, but Raphael is putting them together in this painting. So another famous painting with all this perspective in it to help you get inspired. Obviously, not expecting you to do anything like this, but I think it's important when we talk about this kind of stuff to see the artists that have come before. This time in the Italian Renaissance was a big time of artists working out perspective, working out the mathematics of it, figuring out how to create these really deep 3D spaces on a 2D painting surface. And in this case, it's a wall, a fresco. This is a Japanese unknown artist from the Portland Art Museum collection. And it's called Courtesan Having Her Hair Done. It's in ink on paper. And this is a 2-point perspective. So the points would actually be off the paper. So the artist would sometimes artists make extensions onto their paper to actually draw the point out in the distance or use their imagination. We see the corner of a room, which this is definitely something you can do for your project, is you can do an interior. This is exactly what I mean by interior. You don't have to put people in it, but we have each wall lines going back to a different perspective point. And then we have the box in the middle, which is also in perspective. So creating an interior like this, if you want to do it correctly, learning this perspective is really going to help you. And, when perspective is correct, we don't really notice it, right? It looks correct. But when it's off, it can look really off, and it can kind of just be like this glaring thing in your drawing that looks like a mistake, right? So learning these perspective skills is going to help you be more confident, drawing things like this, drawing buildings, drawing objects in perspective, and really giving them that 3-dimensional look. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about ink, which we're going to get into more next week, but this is just an overview. So you start to think about, while you're doing your composition thumbnails and your sketching, you're going to be using ink for next week. You can use ink this week if you want, but you can use pencil too. But just so you're thinking about that, the final part 2 of this project will be done in ink. So I want you to kind of have that in your head as we start. So there's a lot of different kinds of inks. If you look it up, some can be mixed with water to make them like see-through, more transparent and lighter. And that's really helpful if you're doing that atmospheric perspective, right? That Chinese landscape painting we looked at in the beginning, the far away mountains had more water added to the ink to make them look lighter. Ink can be applied with a pen or a brush, like the examples I'm showing here. And there's a lot of different line widths that you can create. You can have a different brush size. You can use a pen nib, or, these manufactured like micron pens, or what I end up always using. They come in different sizes. Some ink drawings can even be considered paintings, and they're similar to watercolor paintings. I think, it's a little bit of a blurry line sometimes between a drawing and a painting. So that's up to you as the artist to decide. This is not really having to do with our project, but I just love this drawing, this ink on paper drawing from 2002, to show you what ink is capable of. I don't know where I saw this when I first saw this on some art blog or something, but it always stands out to me as just a very impressive technical use of the ink. This is a Japanese artist that's still living, and this is an example of non-representational art. So it's not representing anything in our observable reality, right? It's in this artist imagination. So it's not representing a person or an object that all of us can observe and see in our world. This is right out of the artist imagination. And in a couple weeks, we're going to talk a little more about imagination, but I just wanted to I like to give you kind of a lot of different examples to see where you get inspired and just to see what the medium of ink can do. Okay, so this is Thomas Kuhl, a Dutch artist, and what I want you to look at here is how the pen lines are very bold and energetic. We're going to work on cross-hatching next week, so check out the cross-hatching and the bold use of the pen. It's not clean, it's not perfect. It's this artist getting down the still life with the table in perspective, which is why I included it here, and the circles, the plates in perspective. And there's other objects on the table that look like they're in perspective as well. So just thinking about how the difference between pencil, charcoal, and ink. Notice how bold ink can be. Notice how it makes a really permanent, bold line. So you're not futzing around, you're not erasing things, you're putting down this really bold mark, which I know it's intimidating for me even, but I often, if I'm getting stuck drawing, I'll just make myself do some ink drawings without pencil to like get out of my head and just get stuff down on the paper. So it's a really valuable skill to learn, I think. This is James Abbott McNeill Whistler, an American artist. This is from 1879. It's actually an etching and a dry point, which are printmaking mediums. So they're basically scratched with a metal kind of point tool, a sharp metal tool into a plate. And then the ink usually it's a copper plate, and then the ink is like rubbed into the lines. That's dry point. And then with etching, there's some material, it's like a wax material or resin put on the surface, and then you draw into the waxy material with that same metal point thing, and then you put it in a vat of acid, and then the acid eats away at the plate, at the metal plate where those lines were. Anyway, it is kind of a form of drawing, and ink is used. It just is able to make several copies. What I want you to notice about this is how these little boats in the foreground, also like the one we looked before, drawn very loosely and almost quickly, but with this energy, they're all drawn in their own perspective, right? 1 point perspective, and the composition is leading us into the background, which is using atmospheric perspective with these, even though they're bold ink lines, it is getting almost fuzzier, less detailed. It's just looks like not a mess, but like a jumble. And there's nothing really distinct popping out. We don't see the same detail as we do in the foreground. So again, an example of both atmospheric and linear perspective. Here's another printmaking example. This is a French artist who's still living. These are more recent, from like 2021 and 2022. And what I thought was really cool is this is an example of chiaroscuro, which we've talked about before. And then we also have this really cool line work. So I'm noticing around like the legs of the figure in the foreground, there's that energy with the line work. It has a lot of movement in it, and like the lines around the shadow. So you can do a lot with pen that can't really be done with charcoal or pencil, which is a little more subtle maybe. So think about this new medium that we're trying out and how you can express yourself and what you can express using that medium. And then this also has a really good example of perspective. And that tall building in the back is further away than the buildings in the foreground, but it's still taller. So this happens sometimes in cityscapes where the buildings in the foreground are shorter because they have less floors, and then there might be like a skyscraper in the back. So you can still use your 1 point perspective to get all of those proportions and stuff right, because it can be pretty tricky. And then if you're wondering what the numbers are on the bottom, the artist signature is on the bottom right, and on the bottom left you see a 1 and then a dash and then a 10. one, that basically means 1 out of 10. So that means this artist made 10 versions of this print, they ink up this plate like I was talking about and run it through a printing press, and this is the first one. So printmakers number their prints like that on the bottom because they'll make a limited number, so you're buying an original print that's only 1 of 10, which is kind of cool. Okay, this is a British artist who is still living, and this is from a children's book that he illustrated called Anna and the Juniper Dog from 2012. It's ink on, and if you look at it, you can read, it's ink on Arches paper. He's giving us the exact grams of the paper. I'll tell you, artists can get really obsessed with the paper and the materials that they use. They're even giving us the exact brand of the paper. So some people love seeing this. Some people don't care. It's totally up to you. This is a lovely, Arches makes beautiful papers, but they're also really expensive. So it's not something, this artist is getting paid for this project so they can buy these fancier materials, and you could do, practice drawings on computer paper. So check out the linear perspective on this. This is 1 point perspective. The seat, the back, the car, the side of the car, the stuff on the ceiling, material or whatever that is, all going back into perspective. And then we also have really interesting and beautiful, intricate line work here. So how these bold ink lines are creating shading, creating value, and creating texture, all the different materials that are present in this drawing, all the fabrics and the stuff in the background. I just think this is a really impressive drawing, and I'm sure once you start with ink, you'll recognize how long this probably took this artist, and to get all that perspective correct is really, really impressive. Okay, this is Pat Perry, another artist who's still living. This is from about 2019. And some of you might not have access to pens, so you can totally use pencil on paper. And so this is an example of pencil on paper. And I think it's a good example of showing you can get really bold lines with pencil. I'm thinking of all the line work in the foreground in this grass and then in the detail of the train. So I would just sharpen your pencil really well to practice this cross-hatching technique that we're going to learn. Also check out the line work in the clouds. You can do a lot with pencil too. This is a great 1 point perspective and could be a really interesting subject matter for you to try drawing. Trains are always interesting, and you can get a really long 1 point perspective in there. All right, so for your sketch, we're going to practice the perspective, and the demonstration of that is going to be at the end of this presentation. So what we're going to do is you're going to create 2 1-point perspective drawings in pencil, or you could use charcoal or pen or whatever you want, but on paper. The first one is going to be cubes in space with one vanishing point. Sorry, that was hard to say, all those V's and W's. There's going to be one vanishing point, right? Because it's 1 point perspective, and the one vanishing point is in the center of your paper. And you're going to draw at least 5 different cubes all in perspective around that vanishing point. Again, I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. And then we're going to practice a simple landscape, again with one vanishing point on the horizon line. So you'll have to draw at least a road and a row of buildings in perspective. This is your warm-up for your project, which is your composition pencil drawings. Actually, you can do them in not pencil if you want. So I know this is a lot, but I want to make sure you understand the assignment. This is for the project that's due later in the week. So you're going to choose a place, a location that has 1 point perspective. It can be a landscape, it can be a cityscape or a rural town or scape, or it can be an interior like your kitchen or your bedroom. It could be a corner like we looked at in that beautiful Japanese drawing. So needs to be a place that you've been to in real life. And if you want to take a photograph, so you're able to draw from a photograph, you need to take your own photos. The reason is that if you use other people's photos, that means Google Images or anywhere you find, there is a copyright on the composition in that photograph. So even if you are just drawing, if you're copying the photograph, drawing it on a piece of paper, you are still violating the copyright laws because you're using that person's composition. So of course, no one is going to sue you unless you're out trying to sell your drawing of their composition and make money off of it. But I think it's important as your teacher to make you aware of these things and get you in good habits while you're in school. The best thing to do is to use your own photos and use a place that you've seen in real life. And really, it's also good not just because of legal stuff, but because you'll be more connected to the place. It'll be easier, more fun to draw. You'll be able to look at it in different lighting and really understand what you're drawing. So for your project, you're going to do 4 composition thumbnails in pencil or whatever you want. All the thumbnails should have either linear or atmospheric perspective, and each thumbnail needs to have a noticeably different composition. So it can be different angles of the same location, or you can do 4 different locations, or you can do different angles of 2 different locations. You can mix it up however you want. I just want each thumbnail to be different and each thumbnail to have linear and atmospheric perspective. So you really have a lot of choice in that, and I want you to do something you are excited about because we're going to pick the strongest composition and you're going to make it into a larger drawing next week. I will show you how to transfer it onto paper and then onto larger paper, and then you're going to shade it and draw it in pen. So really take your time to find some great compositions. You can of course do more than 4 if you need to, but at least 4 will be helpful. The project demo is going to be in another video in the project assignment page. And now we will get on to the sketch demo. Okay, so for the first part of your sketch, to warm up with perspective, we're gonna do cubes in space. So this is just a regular piece of computer paper, and I'm gonna find the center of the paper just by folding it in half one way, folding it in half the other way, and we can start from there. And then the center will be the vanishing point. So the vanishing point is the point all the lines in perspective are going to go back towards, and this is how you make believable 3D objects. And for now, for this, beginner class, we're just gonna focus on square rectangle objects and not stuff with curves, because from the other lessons, you know that we always start with like the basic shape anyway, and then you can kind of build anything off of that. So that's like the foundation we want to start with. So this is going to be our vanishing point, and I'm going to make all the perspective lines green so you can see. You do not have to color yours, but I'm just doing it so you can see what I'm doing. So vanishing point is going to be this big pink purple line. That is our vanishing point right in the center of the page. So what you're going to start with the cubes in space is the front face of the cube or rectangle, square. The front of it, what we see that is not in perspective. So you can choose anywhere to draw it. So I'm just going to draw a regular square rectangle. Does not have to be totally perfect, but try to get the lines. So this is the front, and this is not in perspective, right? So now to make it 3-dimensional, we want to draw the sides in perspective. So to do that, take your ruler. You can also use a string, or you can use another piece of paper. So you can use like a paper's edge. If you don't have a ruler, I'll show that first. So you want to connect to the vanishing point and to the corner like that. And I'm just doing it in green so you can see. You can do yours all in pencil. And so I'm at the vanishing point and I'm at the corner of my box. Now, if it was going to be like a see-through glass cube, you could do it to the corner here. I won't be doing that because I think it might get a little confusing. So here, let me get on the other side. So vanishing point, corner. And, you know, take your time. Probably will go back to using my ruler. There we go. So just find some kind of straight edge to help you get that. So those are our vanishing lines that go back. And now you can really choose how long this box with this cube will be. Like this is the top and this is the side. And if it's a solid cube, you know, that we don't see through, we're gonna pretend like we can't see through it. So these lines are always going to be parallel. So this line, however long you want to make your box, is going to be parallel, and this is going to be parallel to this line. So this creates a right angle here, and these two lines will also create a right angle. So on this plane, so we're thinking about planes, right? Like the front plane is the front facing us, and then we have this side plane, and these two lines are parallel. And this is where creating these parallel lines is where you get more accuracy. And once you do this a lot, you can really start to kind of do it by eyeball when you're sketching and stuff. So then this is our box. This would be the top and the side. So that's how you make a 3D box. Now what I want you to do is do them all over in different points around. So let's try one over here, a really tall one. So we're starting again with the front plane, and you can use a ruler or you can use graph paper to make yours straight. So I'm going from one corner to the vanishing point. I'll use my green pencil and go back like that. And go back like that. So we have these 4 quadrants here, and in the bottom 2 quadrants, we're gonna see the top. And then in the top 2 quadrants, we'll see the bottoms, because we're looking, like if this is the vanishing point, this is the horizon line, or it's also called the eye level line. So think about how if this is where your eye level is looking at something, this is below your eye level, so you're seeing the top of it. And depending on which side of the vanishing point, you're seeing either side of it. And now you'll see when I draw one on the top, getting ahead of myself here. Perspective is exciting. Okay, here we go. So since this is further away, we can see it goes at a much different angle. And then again, we can choose how long this side is. I'll make this a narrow one just to differentiate. And this line is parallel to this line. So all the lines that are not going back in perspective are parallel. That's how and then they connect. So this is going to make a right angle. So these lines, this line and this line, are not going back in perspective, so they're parallel to each other. And then we just connect here, and this is our box. And if you shade it in, it helps to, shade it in the direction it's going, so we can see the front, side, and top. Now let's try one up here. We'll do it up here. So make it a little bigger. And now I'm gonna connect the corners, and if you're not sure what you're going to see, the bottom or the top or whatever, connecting the corners is gonna tell you what you'll see, because this would be see-through. If it was a see-through box, it would go to here. but I'm just connecting the ones that will be visible if this box was not see-through. Okay, so here's one. And I want you to draw your lines all the way to the vanishing point so you start to really get an idea of how this works. Here's 2. And here's 3. And then this line is not in perspective, so it's parallel to this line. This line is not in perspective, so it's parallel, and they're make this connection here. So now we see the bottom of the object, because if this is our eye level line, we're then looking up. So I want you to practice making these cubes in space. Make sure to get at least one in each quadrant. Practice a couple, as many as you can fit. You can draw lines kind of over each other. You could do small and big ones. This is really the foundation of creating objects in 1 point perspective. This is 1 point perspective because we have this one vanishing point. Okay, so the next drawing, we're gonna do a simple landscape. And again, I'm just on my computer paper. You can do this in your sketchbook or whatever you want. You could do it on the back if you want to save paper. Totally up to you. Okay, so I'm gonna make my horizon, my eye level line, and you can choose wherever you want it to be. I'll make it kind of more towards the center. So this is my horizon or eye level line slash eye level. It's right here. And then you can choose where you want your vanishing point to be. So I'm gonna make mine a little bit off center. You could do yours right in the center. I'm just gonna make mine a little bit off center to show you. And this is our VP for vanishing point. So everything is gonna meet back to here for this is 1 point perspective. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is draw a road. So we're gonna do a simple landscape with a road and a row of buildings. So I'm gonna have my road kind of go here, all the way to the edge of the paper. And it's a long, straight road all the way to the horizon. So that's my road. And you could do, if you wanna get fancy, you could do the little lines coming from the middle, and you can have them they can get bigger as they get closer, right? They're gonna get bigger as they get closer. And if you wanted to be even really fancy, you could make them doubled up and then in perspective. That's just crazy. But it's kind of fun. I think if you some people don't love perspective, some people love it. If you get really into it, you could start, anyway, I won't keep doing that, but you can start having too much fun. So this is our road. And then I wanna make a row of buildings. So there'll be like a little sidewalk. I'm gonna do that in pencil, so it's just a different color because I think there's too much green on here. So I'm gonna leave a little space for like a sidewalk area here. And this is gonna be the bottom of my row of buildings. Now this can get a little tricky. What I usually do is I start the first building, the front facing, as like a square, a rectangle. So this is my front facing building. So it's always easiest to start with the thing that is not in perspective, right? Because you know this is just a rectangle. Let's say this is the side of the building and the front of the building is facing the street. For me, this is the front facing plane because I'm looking at it. Okay, so now we're in this bottom half, we're below the horizon line, the eye level line, so we're gonna see the top of it. We don't see the bottom's under here. Just like you wouldn't see the bottom of a building in real life. So I'm gonna go from this corner to this corner, and usually if it's a row of buildings, I'll just make the whole thing. Oops, made that a little too high. Okay, so this is the top of the building, and these are the sides. And you can come in here, since this line is not in perspective, you can come and do parallel lines all throughout to make different buildings, right? To make a row of buildings. Now, let's say one of your buildings you wanted to be taller, like let's say this one is a skyscraper in here. You can draw it up. And then if it's over the horizon line, the eye level line, it's gonna go up like this. And you can just connect those. And then the side is parallel to this. So you can always use your ruler or piece of paper, and I like to just like kind of slide it up, or the horizon line, slide it up, and then we know that that's parallel. And then the side of the building is parallel to this. I'm gonna make it narrow, and it's coming down here, and then it's gonna get hidden, right, by this other building that's in front of it. So it probably stops here. And you can erase stuff. Let me get this out of the way so you can see what's happening. Okay, let's give this building a little more depth. Maybe there's a space in between. So I'm gonna make another parallel line, and I'm gonna finish this building, and then it's going to end. So I'm looking at this parallel line. I'm using my ruler to just scooch it up. And this is where this building ends. So this is the top of this building. And let's say there's like an alleyway here. Get my other eraser so really get rid of this. So we know that this building is gonna go back here, right? And then this would be the alleyway, and this line is straight back because it's parallel to this. So you would have a little, alleyway in here that you could create, and you could erase this if you want. So these are the guidelines that help you create something in perspective. So let me just make them darker so you can see what's happening. So this is the big tall building. And this is the shorter building, but it's in front. And you don't have to do one that's taller because that's a little, and you can use your ruler so it's not as wiggly as mine. But then if there was like an alleyway or a street that went in here, you could do that. And then I want you to try to make some windows and doors. So what I usually do is I look at it and I'm like, I think the door would probably be like around here. And maybe this one has like a tall, crazy door. So I just kind of make like a mark where I think it'll be, so I'm not going all over the place. And you can take your ruler, and if you don't want to draw all the way to the vanishing point for these details, you don't have to, because then you could end up with a lot of lines. So here's the top of the door. And then we know the sides are going to be parallel. So I'm taking my ruler, connecting it to this parallel line, and then just going from the corner down. And then from this corner down. Okay, so this would be the door. Maybe it's a double door, it looks kind of wide. And then you could do the same for windows. So for windows, I usually go all the way across the building. I'll do some on this one. So you can see, that would be the bottom of the window, this would be the top. And then if it was, let me get my smaller ruler, my see-through ruler. So then you can draw the sides of it. So here would be two windows. Okay, this does not have to be perfect. I just want you to kind of practice drawing details like this in perspective. And then when you get to the eye level line, things are straight, which is kind of nice. And then when you go over it, they start going up again. So that is why I wanted to show you this. it's gonna go, the windows up here. Obviously you can take time to make them the right proportion to the other windows on the building, but they would look like that. This is distracting. So there we go. This is the start of getting some things in perspective. So I want you to practice making a couple, like a row of buildings or houses. You can come back here and just keep making parallel lines and then connecting them. And then this would go this way, right? It's parallel to this. Just slide it up, slide this up, and this up. And some of the angles get really funny, so that's why it helps to, that's why you kind of have to make the vanishing point, because this angle here is one of those angles that's almost not an angle, and it feels like close. It's a really wide angle. It feels close to a straight line, but there is an angle there, and that's how it's going to look realistic. But if you try to draw this just out of your head, you might make it a little bit off. And then if you wanted to do on the other side, you could do a fence or street lamps. And if you're doing something like that, this is optional. You don't have to do all this. But if you're doing something like street lamps or trees, I always make the vanishing point lines to start. And maybe the trees go up here. So you could do like a tree, that would be one tree, just to practice, or street lamp, one tree. And you can see the trees getting smaller and smaller. So this is a way to give yourself a guideline to getting things the correct proportion and the correct perspective. So just try these two simple sketches, the cubes in space, and the simple landscape with a road and some buildings, maybe put some windows on. Just practice and have fun with it.